Welcome to Channel 17, the Town of Colonie Government Channel.
Anyway, so here's Lisa Witkowski to tell us about the Battle Hymn of the Tiger Mother by Amy Chua. I think you say her name.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming on this gorgeous June day. I really appreciate it. Today we're going to take a look at Battle Hymn of the Tiger Mother by Amy Chua, which was published earlier this year by Penguin Press. I recall the firestorm of controversy when the book was first published. Right before it hit the shelves, the WallStreetJournal.com featured an article by Chua entitled, "Why Chinese Mothers Are Superior." And remember, it's the editors who write the headlines, not the reporter and the writers. And this was taken directly from her book. The Wall Street Journal received nearly 6,000 responses to it, more responses than to any other piece they have ever run, ever. The article and the first chapter of the book read, and I've just hit the point in life where I need reading glasses and I'm in denial about it, so if you see me doing that, I'm just trying to adjust. A lot of people wonder how Chinese parents raise such stereotypically successful kids. They wonder what these parents do to produce so many math whizzes and music prodigies, what it's like inside the family and whether they could do it too. Well, I can tell them because I've done it. Here are some things my daughters, Sophia and Louisa, were never allowed to do. Attend a sleepover, have a play date, be in a school play, complain about not being in a school play, watch TV, play computer games, choose their own extracurricular activities, get any grade less than an A, not be the #1 student in every subject except gym and drama, play any instrument except piano or violin, not play the piano or violin. And she says she's using the term Chinese mother loosely, that not all Chinese mothers are buying into this, and there are plenty of Irish and Indian and Polish and Italian and Ghanaian mothers, and even dads who are buying into this method of raising the children. She also says right off the bat that this is not a how-to book on parenting. It is simply a memoir. And it says right on the cover of the book, this is a story about a mother, 2 daughters, and 2 dogs. This was supposed to be a story of how Chinese parents are better at raising kids than Western ones. But instead, it's about a bitter clash of cultures, a fleeting taste of glory, and how I was humbled by a 13-year-old. I couldn't wait to sink my teeth into this book because there was a lot of controversy about it. I am raising 2 kids of my own, so on one hand, I wanted to really enjoy hating this woman and her overachieving daughters, but I also wanted to pick up some really good pointers that I could use at home. First, let's get something out of the way. Any mention of stereotyping or Asian superiority is Chua's and not mine. I think on an intellectual level, we all agree that it's not a good idea to assign stereotypes, but we all kind of do it. And it does raise an interesting question. If you are complimenting a race or an ethnicity or a religion, is that bad too? Is it a negative stereotype to say something complimentary? Like saying to Asian people, you guys are all such musical prodigies and math wizards, or saying to Indian people, you all do great at medical school and engineering school. Do you recall the TV show Maude? It was on in the early 70s. Maude's daughter in one of the episodes was due to marry a Jewish man, and something happened and Maude's daughter broke off the engagement, and Maude said, I am really upset about this because everyone knows that Jewish men make the best husbands and daddies. And the man said, you may not realize this, but that is actually an anti-Semitic remark. So just kind of keep that in mind for a little bit. I'm going to give you some background on Amy Chua and her family, and it'll sound like a lot, but you'll understand why I'm giving you so much backstory. Chua's grandparents and parents were born in China, and they moved to the Philippines in the 20s and 30s to pursue better business opportunities. Her father's family made a fortune in plastics. They had the Johnson & Johnson account for containers, go figure. He actually hated the idea of going into the family business, so very unlike the traditional and dutiful Chinese son, he applied to the Massachusetts Institute of Technology on the sly. He got in and emigrated to the United States to work on his PhD. Chua and her 3 sisters were born and raised in the Midwest, where their dad was teaching at Purdue University. The girls were required to speak Chinese at home, and high academic achievement and obedience were stressed. When Chua was in elementary school, she won an award, I think, for history by the local Kiwanis Club, and the family went to the dinner, and she picked up her award, and there was another student who got an award for best all-round overall student. Her father took her aside after it was over and said, "Never, ever disgrace me like that again." So just a little idea of what she grew up in. In 1971, the family packed up and moved to Berkeley when he got a position at the University of California. Chua's father is an internationally known expert in the field of chaos theory. I looked that up on Wikipedia, and I still don't get it. Yes. Okay, all right. All right, sorry about that. He's an internationally known expert in the field of chaos theory, and it has to do with dynamicals and mathematics, and I'm sorry, I can't explain it any further than that. The family traveled around the world with him, and Chua and her sisters actually went to school in Europe for a couple years. It seems that there was a rebellious streak. Is the volume better now? Okay, thank you. It seems that a rebellious streak runs in the family. Just as her father went against his family's plans for him, so did Chua go against hers. Her father said she was going to Berkeley, where he taught. No discussion, no campus tours, that was it. She was going to Berkeley. But on the sly, she applied to a little college in Cambridge, Massachusetts called Harvard University and was accepted. She received her bachelor's there and went on to graduate from Harvard Law. She met her husband, Jed, who is Jewish, at Harvard. They were both on the law review, which is a tremendous honor for law students. And after several job changes, they both ended up on the faculty at Yale and started their family. It may sound exotic, but Chua said that in their academic circles, a combination Chinese and Jewish family is really not all that unusual. She said that since she planned to do most of the parenting, she would take the lead on deciding how they were going to raise their kids. One thing that struck me early on in the book, and that Chua does not point out, is that these 2 girls started out with stellar genes. She didn't create these little prodigies from whole cloth. I mean, these kids were Powerball lottery winning, Willy Wonka golden ticket holders in the DNA department. Both her parents are faculty members at one of the most prestigious universities in the world. They are both best-selling authors. Their parents' parents are as accomplished in their fields. They also lucked out in the cash department. Their families are very wealthy, which helps a lot when it comes to paying for music lessons and a piano and violin and a nanny and world travel. Sophia, the firstborn, was intellectually precocious and at 18 months knew her entire alphabet. She excelled in nursery school, particularly math. Her mother said, while the other kids were learning to count from 1 to 10 the creative American way, using rods, cones, and beads, I taught Sophia addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, fractions, and decimals. She struck a deal with her husband that any and all of their children would learn to speak Mandarin Chinese, which is actually not the dialect that Chua spoke in her family growing up. And they hired a full-time nanny to speak full-time Chinese to their kids. 3 years later, their daughter Louisa, whom they call Lulu, was born. Where Sophia was docile and obedient, Lulu was willful and obstinate. Chua said that she and her daughter share and this is a quote, the same hot-tempered, viper-tongued personality. Can you imagine 2 females with viper-tongued personalities in the same house? Chua says that in the West, obedience is associated with dogs and the caste system, but in China, it's considered among the highest of virtues. She said she was determined to raise an obedient Chinese child, which is not easy in the West, particularly in the United States. It worked with Sophia because she was such a docile and easily led child. Not so with Louisa. When Lulu was 3 years old, she had her first piano lesson at home. They have a grand piano in their home. And she sat down and was banging with both hands on the keyboard. And her mother said, "No, that is not the way we play," and took her hands away. And Lulu did this again. And she finally picked up her child, kicking and screaming. And it was the middle of winter, and set her outside in the cold and shut the door to teach her a lesson. About a minute later, she opened the door, told Lulu it was time to come back in. Lulu did this. "Lulu, it's freezing, you'll get sick, come in." No. And she said, "I realized right then and there what that child was made of, but no worry, I just had to rearm myself." She said, "I tried to demand as much respect from the girls as my parents did of me. This is where I was least successful. Growing up, I was terrified of my parents' disapproval. Not so with Sophia, and especially Lulu. America seems to convey something to kids that Chinese culture doesn't. In Chinese culture, it just wouldn't occur to children to question, disobey, or talk back to their parents. In American culture, kids in books, TV shows, and movies constantly score points with their snappy backtalk and independent streaks. Typically, it's the parents who need to be taught a life lesson by their children." I call this the Homer Simpson syndrome. Chua said she wanted her daughters to play the piano or the violin. There were no other choices. She said guitar and drums lead to drugs. Not to become professional musicians, but simply to master something very difficult and to have the pleasure of creating beautiful music. And most importantly, to help them gain entrance into an excellent university. When Sophia started on the piano, they used the Suzuki method, which features 7 books, each with 10 to 15 songs. I think Chua said that it fits her need for clear goals and measurable results. You can go through the Suzuki books as fast or slowly as you need to. Some kids go through them very quickly. It just depends on how hard you practice, how long you practice, and also what innate musical talent you have. Chua seems to stress work, work, work in her book, which is fine, and of course it's necessary, but she's not recognizing that some people simply have innate talent for certain things and others don't. A key feature of the Suzuki method is that the parent is expected to attend every music lesson and then supervise all practice sessions at home. So I think that's a great setup for control freaks like Amy Chua. She made Sophia practice double on lesson days to help her absorb what she just learned and made her memorize all her pieces even though that wasn't required. Chua mentions in her book exactly what the pieces were that the kids had to work on, and I YouTubed some of them. You can just call up YouTube, put in the composer, the name of the piece, and you'll have several selections of people playing it, children and professionals, and you can also call up a version where you have the music and you can see the sheet music right now. And I was actually just blown back in my chair by what these young children were able to play. Chua says, "This seems like a good time to get something off my chest. The truth is, it wasn't always enjoyable for Sophia to have me as a mother. According to Sophia, here are 3 things I actually said to her at the piano as I supervised her practicing. Oh my God, you are just getting worse and worse. Number 2, I'm going to count to 3 and I want musicality. Number 3, if the next time is not perfect, I'm going to take all your stuffed animals and burn them." Chua says that what Chinese parents understand is that nothing is fun until you're good at it. To get good at anything, you have to work, and children on their own never want to work, which is why it is crucial to override their preferences. This often requires fortitude on the part of the parents because the child will resist. Things are always hardest at the beginning, which is where Western parents and children tend to give up. But if done properly, the Chinese strategy produces a virtuous circle. Tenacious practice, practice, practice is crucial for excellence. Rote repetition is underrated in America. Once a child starts to excel at something, whether it's math, piano, pitching, ballet, he or she gets praise, admiration, and satisfaction. This builds confidence and makes the once not fun activity fun. This in turn makes it easier for the parent to get the child to work even more. My daughter has been taking guitar for a year, and she, as I knew would happen, she has just hit the point where she said, I don't want to play it anymore. She actually chose the guitar because she thought she would never have to be in a recital. So imagine her surprise when her teacher said that in May they have a recital. She didn't want to do it. And I had read this book a few months ago, and it did give me the courage to say, Dad and I would like you to be in the recital. Because if you do something that you were afraid to do, you realize that, I did it, it was okay, I didn't fall apart, and you've learned something. Well, she did it, and she didn't fall apart, but she is saying now, I want to quit. Well, what Western parents would just say, okay, she doesn't want to do it anymore, I'll let it go. But this book, as harsh as you'll see it is later, gives you a little bit of courage to just say, stick with it for another year, because the longer you do it, the better you get at it, the more fun it is. She said, well, Mom, the pieces are hard. I said, that's why you practice. They get better the more you practice. She practiced for 10 minutes the other day. I said, get back upstairs. I want another 10 minutes. She said, that's all I have in me today. So I said, no, you're going up and you're practicing again. A lot of Western parents, she is saying in this book, and I think I agree, is not that you don't want to push your kids, but you just want to have some peace in your house. And I think when they're young, it's good to let them try different things. But how do you know when to just let them give up something and when to say, all right, you got to just stick with it for another year, another 2 years. That's a really difficult thing. Much of this book is about her daughter's music lessons. It's just kind of assumed that on the side, the girls are going to school and getting straight A's and winning academic prizes as required by their mother, and that's precisely what they do. In addition to the practice, there are really just very few paragraphs in this whole book where Chua is giving us actual concrete advice on how we can make our children replicate these results. She said, in addition to the practice, rote drilling is one key. Once, she said, Sophia came in second on a multiplication speed test, which her 5th grade teacher administered every Friday. She lost to a Korean boy. Over the next week, I made Sophia do 20 practice tests of 100 problems each night, with me clocking her with a stopwatch. After that, she came in first every time. Poor Yoon Suk, he went back to Korea with his family, but probably not because of the speed test. There seems to be a lot of motivation on her part not to just have her daughters learn for the sake of knowledge or practice their music for the sake of the beauty of it, but to beat other people. She often says, you have to be the first, you have to be the best, you have to be the first one. He did better than you, we're going to work harder. You don't want to practice on vacation? Well, the Kims don't take vacation. Do you want them to get ahead of us? That's said frequently throughout the book. It mentions on the cover that it's a story about 2 daughters and 2 dogs. Amy Chua adopted 2 Samoyeds, and she applied Chinese parenting methods to training the dogs. She said she was, quote unquote, nauseated to find out that this breed was not among the more intelligent of dog breeds. Then she breathed a sigh of relief because apparently on dog IQ tests, they didn't score well because they were so self-motivated and liked to do their own thing as opposed to follow what a master or a trainer did. So I guess things went a little better after that. The girls were expected to practice 2 to 3 hours every day. And she supervised a lot of this practice. She said they practiced on their birthdays, they practiced on holidays, even when they had dental surgery and they were on Tylenol with codeine, they were expected to practice 2 to 3 hours a day. They even were expected to practice when the family was traveling, as they did a lot. Chua says that for Lulu, bringing her violin was fine. It was her carry-on whenever they went on an airplane. But for Sophia to practice piano, she had to arrange with the hotel where they were staying to reserve a piano for her. She says there's typically one in the lobby bar and at least 2 in the various conference reception rooms. I would just call the concierge in advance and book the grand ballroom at the Chicago Marriott from 6 a.m. to 8 a.m., or the Wentworth Room at the Pasadena Hotel from 10 p.m. to midnight. Occasionally, there were glitches. In Maui, the concierge at the Grand Wailea Hotel set Sophia up at an electronic keyboard in the Volcano Bar. But the keyboard was 2 octaves too short for Chopin's Polonaise in C-sharp minor, and there was a distracting snorkeling class going on at the same time, so Sophia ended up practicing in a basement storage room where they were refurbishing the hotel's baby grand. I'm just trying to think of what my daughter would say if I brought her guitar along to Disney World. And she said that Chua said that it was worth it whenever the girls returned from vacation, and these were vacations that were 1 or 2 weeks at a time. Their music teachers were amazed and thrilled that they had made progress over vacation. Things got a little sticky though. When they traveled to Greece, apparently Lulu was getting lippy and she didn't perfect a part of her piece to Chua's specification, so she just wanted her to practice 10 or 15 minutes before they went to do some sightseeing. The grandparents were with them at the time. "No, Mom," I said firmly. "Lulu promised she would do this because she wanted to stop early yesterday. If she cooperates, it should really just take 10 or 15 minutes. We'll go easy today." I wouldn't wish the misery that followed on anyone. Jed, Sophia, Lulu, and I cooped up in one claustrophobic hotel room with Jed lying on top of the bedspread, grimly trying to focus on an old issue of the International Herald Tribune. Sophia hiding in the bathroom reading, my parents waiting in the lobby, afraid to interfere and afraid other guests would overhear Lulu and me bickering, yelling, and provoking each other. "That note was flat again, Lulu." "Actually, it was sharp, Mommy. You don't know anything." Obviously, I couldn't stop after 10 minutes when Lulu had refused to play even a single note properly. When it was all over, Lulu was furious and tear-stained, Jed was tight-lipped, my parents were sleepy, and the Palace of Knossos that we wanted to visit was closed for the day. Is it worth it? Is it worth it to her? Is it worth it to her daughters? Would it be worth it to us if we did something like this to our own kids? Chua says, "I don't know how my daughters will look back on all of this 20 years from now. Will they tell their own children, my mother was a controlling fanatic who even in India made us practice before we could see Bombay or New Delhi? Or will they have softer memories? Perhaps Lulu will recall playing the first movement of the Bruch Violin Concerto beautifully in Agra in front of an arched hotel window that looked straight out to the Taj Mahal. We didn't fight that day for some reason. Maybe it was jet lag. Will Sophia recall with bitterness the time I laid into her at a piano in Barcelona because her fingers were not kicking high enough? If so, I hope she also remembers Roquebrune, a village perched on a cliff in France, where the manager of our hotel heard Sophia practicing and invited her to perform for the entire restaurant that evening. In a glass-windowed room overlooking the Mediterranean, Sophia played Mendelssohn's Rondo Capriccioso and got bravos and hugs from all the guests. The grandmother who was Jed's mother accompanied them on the ill-fated trip to Greece. She was sick with leukemia, and they took her in because they said this was the Chinese way. They ensconced her in the guest bedroom and immediately hired a full-time nurse to take care of her. So not a lot of effort on Chua's part. Chua said, "The truth is, I'm not good at enjoying life. It's not one of my strengths. I keep a lot of to-do lists and hate massages and Caribbean vacations." Florence, who is the grandmother that they call Popo, Florence saw childhood as something fleeting to be enjoyed. I saw childhood as a training period, a time to build character and invest for the future. Florence always wanted to spend one full day with each girl. She begged me for that, but I never had a full day for them to spare. The girls barely had time as it was to do their homework, speak Chinese with their tutor, and practice their instruments. Chua says that in spite of all of this, she doesn't think that Western children end up happier or loving their parents more. She said, here's the thing. When I look all around at the Western families that fall apart, all the grown sons and daughters who can't stand to be around their parents or don't even talk to them, I have a hard time believing that Western parenting does a better job with happiness. It's amazing how many older Western parents I've met who said, shaking their heads sadly, as a parent, you just can't win. No matter what you do, your kids grow up resenting you. By contrast, I can't tell you how many Asian kids I've met who, while acknowledging how oppressively strict and brutally demanding their parents were, happily describe themselves as devoted to their parents and unbelievably grateful to them, seemingly without a trace of resentment or bitterness. I'm not really sure why this is. Maybe it's brainwashing, or maybe it's the Stockholm Syndrome. But here's one thing I'm sure of. Western children are definitely no happier than Chinese ones. This is what I found interesting in the book. She never really tells us why this works out the way it is. Is it in their DNA? Is it just years and years and centuries of their culture? Is it Confucianism that they've been studying for centuries and centuries? She can't put her finger on it. And this is what is a little maddening. She simply says this is the way it is. When Lulu was 4 and Sophia was 7, it was Amy Chua's birthday, and they went out to what she called a mediocre Italian restaurant because her husband forgot to make reservations. And the girls each made a card for their mother, which is what a lot of kids do. Let's see. I was soaking some stale focaccia in the small dish of olive oil the server had given us. At Jed's urging, Lulu handed me her surprise, which turned out to be a card. More accurately, it was a piece of paper folded crookedly in half. Keep in mind Lulu is 4, with a big happy face on the front. Inside, "Happy birthday, Mommy. Love, Lulu," was scrawled in crayon above another happy face. The card couldn't have taken Lulu more than 20 seconds to make. I know what Jed would have done. He would have said, "Oh, how nice, thank you, honey," and planted a stiff kiss on Lulu's forehead. I gave the card back to Lulu. "I don't want this," I said. "I want a better one that you've put some thought and effort into. I have a special box where I keep all my cards from you and Sophia, and this one can't go in there." "What?" said Lulu in disbelief. I saw beads of sweat start to form on Jed's forehead. I grabbed the card and flipped it over. I pulled out a pen from my purse and scrawled, "Happy birthday, Lulu, whoopee," and added a big sour face. "What if I gave you this for your birthday, Lulu? Would you like that?" "But I would never do that, Lulu. No, I get you magicians and giant slides that cost me hundreds of dollars. I get you huge ice cream cakes shaped like penguins, and I spend half my salary on stupid sticker and eraser party favors that everyone just throws away. I work so hard to give you good birthdays. I deserve better than this. So I reject this." And I threw the card back at her. "May I please be excused for a second?" Sophia said in a small voice. "I need to do something." "Let me see it, Sophia. Hand it over." Eyes wide in terror, Sophia slowly pulled out her own card. It was bigger than Lulu's, made of red construction paper, but while more effusive, was equally empty. She had drawn a few flowers and written, "I love you. Happy birthday to the best mommy in the world. #1 mommy." "That's nice, Sophia," I said coldly, "but not good enough either. When I was your age, I wrote poems for my mother on her birthday. I got up early and cleaned the house and made her breakfast. I tried to think of creative ideas, and I made her coupons that said things like 1 free car wash. I wanted to make something better, but you said I had to play piano," Sophia protested indignantly. "You should have gotten up earlier," I responded. Later that night, I received 2 much better birthday cards, which I loved and still have. Sophia, who is now at the age where she's applying to colleges, was interviewed by the New York Post a couple months ago about the birthday card incident. And she simply said, "It was a feeble card and I was busted. Of course I should have done better," which I think is a wonderfully magnanimous response to her mother. Chua says that in expecting this level of performance from her children when they were that young, she was preparing them to do more important things as they grew older. When the girls were 10 and 14, Popo died, and she wanted each of the girls to write a short speech to give at the funeral service. The girls simply did not want to do it. They were just too distraught by their grandmother's death. They felt they were too young. How can you make us do this? She said, I told the girls they each had to write a short speech about Popo, which they would read at the service that afternoon. She was buried according to Jewish law, so everything happened within 24 hours. No, please, Mommy, don't make me do it, Sophia said tearfully. I mean, the girls were huddled in their bedroom crying over the death of their grandmother. I can't, Lulu sobbed. Go away. You have to, I ordered, both of you. Popo would have wanted it. Sophia's first draft was terrible, rambling and superficial. Lulu's wasn't so great either, but I held my daughter to a higher standard. Perhaps because I was so upset myself, I lashed out at her. How could you, Sophia? I said viciously. This is awful. It has no insight. It has no depth. It's like a Hallmark card, which Popo hated. You're so selfish. Popo loved you so much, and you produce this. Crying uncontrollably, Sophia shouted back at me, which startled me because, like Jed, and unlike Lulu and me, Sophia's anger usually simmers, rarely boiling over. You have no right to say what Popo would have wanted. You didn't even like Popo. You had this fixation with Chinese values and respect for elders, but all you ever did was mock her behind her back. The Tiger Mother won this time. The girls rewrote their pieces, delivered them at the funeral service that afternoon, and apparently were wonderful. It was in the arena of music that her exhortations for excellence really began to reap results. Sophia was accepted as a student of a faculty member at the Yale Graduate School of Music. He rarely, occasionally took an undergraduate, but Sophia was only 14 years old, and he said that he would take her as a student if she did not expect any special treatment because she was so young. So her mother accepted right away. She says with preparing for recitals and concerts and competitions, I love being able to count on Sophia. She has wells of inner strength. Even more than me, she can take anything. Exclusion, excoriation, humiliation, and loneliness. Is this what you want for your 14-year-old daughter? Sophia entered a competition she prepared with her music instructor. She had to submit, I think, 3 pieces on a CD and send it to the competition judges, and she was accepted to play a recital at Carnegie Hall at the age of 14. I mean, this is what it's all about, playing Carnegie Hall. Her teacher chose a piece by Prokofiev called Juliet as a Young Girl. They had the recital, the competition winners had the recital at Carnegie Hall. Chua noted that it wasn't the biggest recital hall in Carnegie Hall, and that perhaps in later years they would try for one of the bigger rooms. They had a Bafo reception afterwards at the St. Regis Hotel. She said after the concert, afterward, when everyone else rushed to congratulate and hug her, I hung back. I didn't need that cliched moment where Sophia's eyes sought mine out in a crowd. I just watched my cute little grown-up girl from afar, laughing with her friends and piling up the flowers. And I thought it was so heartbreaking that you would think at last she achieved something. She blew through that piece with beauty and expression, and her mother couldn't even embrace her after it was all over and say, I'm proud of you. It was simply, I think we might be able to play the bigger room next time. The very next morning, Lulu auditioned for a spot in the pre-college program at the Juilliard School of Music in front of Itzhak Perlman. She didn't make the program, but she was accepted as a private student of one of the most prestigious teachers on the faculty. Chua accepted and drove her daughter to Manhattan regularly for the lessons. Interestingly, although through all of this, Chua is continuing to teach at Yale, do her own writing, publish, and touring to give lectures and promote her books. I'm amazed at this woman's energy and drive. I can't keep my kids in clean underwear. I can't keep my kitchen floor clean. And she's teaching full-time at Yale and driving kids back and forth to Manhattan, supervising their practice. She must sleep 2 hours a night. I'll tell you what she's not doing. She's not going to Target. She's not cooking. She's not doing laundry. She's not cleaning her bathroom. She's hiring that out to somebody else. So my excuse is my kids could be geniuses, but I have to iron. What is Chua doing this for? Here's a question I often get. But Amy, let me ask you this. Who are you doing all this pushing for? Your daughters? And here always the cocked head, the knowing tone, or yourself? I find this a very Western question to ask because in Chinese thinking, the child is the extension of the self. But that doesn't mean it's not an important one. My answer, I'm pretty sure, is that everything I do is unequivocally 100% for my daughters. My main evidence is that so much of what I do with Sophia and Lulu is miserable, exhausting, and not even remotely fun for me. Or her daughters, I would think. It's not easy to make your kids work when they don't want to put in grueling hours when your own youth is slipping away, to convince your kids they can do something when they, and maybe even you, are fearful that they can't. Do you know how many years you've taken off my life? I'm constantly asking the girls. The family took a vacation to Moscow just to travel, just for the fun of it. No one was giving a book presentation or receiving an award. They were just going to go to Moscow as a family. And they were walking around Red Square, and Jed was giving a tutorial on Cold War politics or some such, and they decided to stop in at a cafe. This is where it all went down. We decided to get blinis and caviar, a fun way to start off our first evening in Moscow, Jed and I thought. But when the caviar arrived, $30 US for a tiny receptacle, Lulu said, "Ew, gross," and wouldn't even try it. "Sophia, don't take so much, leave some for the rest of us," I snapped, then turned to my other daughter. "Lulu, you sound like an uncultured savage. Try the caviar. You can put a lot of sour cream on it." "That's even worse," Lulu said, and she made a shuddering gesture. "And don't call me a savage." "Don't wreck the vacation for everyone, Lulu. You're the one wrecking it." I pushed the caviar toward Lulu. She was 13 at the time. I ordered her to try one single egg. "Why?" Lulu asked defiantly. "Why do you care so much? You can't force me to eat something." I felt my temper rising. Could I not get Lulu to do even one tiny thing? "You're behaving like a juvenile delinquent. Try one egg now." "I don't want to," said Lulu. "Do it now, Lulu." "No." "Amy," Jed began diplomatically, "everyone's tired. Why don't we just—" I broke in. "Do you know how sad and ashamed my parents would be if they saw this? Lulu, you publicly disobeying me. With that look on your face, you're only hurting yourself. We're in Russia and you refuse to try caviar? You're like a barbarian. And in case you think you're being a big rebel, you're completely ordinary. There is nothing more typical, more predictable, more common and low than an American teenager who won't try things. You're boring, Lulu, boring." "Shut up," said Lulu angrily. "Don't you dare say shut up to me. I'm your mother," I hissed. And a few guests glanced over. "Stop trying to act tough to impress Sophia." "I hate you, I hate you." This from Lulu was not in a hiss. It was an all-out shout at the top of her lungs. Now the entire cafe was staring at us. "You don't love me," Lulu spat out. "You think you do, but you don't. You just make me feel bad about myself every second. You have wrecked my life. I can't stand to be around you. Is that what you want?" A lump rose in my throat. Lulu saw it, but she went on. "You're a terrible mother. You're selfish. You don't care about anybody but yourself. What, you can't believe how ungrateful I am after all you've done for me? Everything you say you do for me is actually for yourself." She's just like me, I thought, compulsively cruel. "You're a terrible daughter," I said aloud. "I know I'm not what you want. I'm not Chinese. I don't want to be Chinese. Why can't you get that through your head? I hate the violin. I hate my life. I hate you, and I hate this family. I'm going to take this glass and smash it." "Do it," I dared. Lulu grabbed the glass from the table and threw it on the ground. Water and shards went flying, and some guests gasped. I felt all eyes upon us, a grotesque spectacle. I made a career out of spurning the kind of Western parents who can't control their kids. Now I had the most disrespectful, rude, violent, out-of-control kid of all. Lulu was trembling with rage, and there were tears in her eyes. "I'll smash more if you don't leave me alone," she cried. I got up and ran. Then I had stopped. I had come to the edge of Red Square, and there was no one else to go. Chua said that she chose the violin for Lulu because the violin symbolized control over generational decline, over birth order, over one's destiny, over one's children. Why should the grandchildren of immigrants only be able to play the guitar and drums? Why should second children predictably be less rule-abiding, less successful at school, and more social than older siblings? In short, the violin symbolized the success of the Chinese parenting model. For Lulu, it symbolized oppression. She returned to the cafe, and the waiters and the other guests averted their eyes as she walked in. "Lulu," I said, "you win. It's over. We're giving up the violin." Lulu did give up the violin and chose something else that she loved to do, tennis, and applied all her drive and all her talent to that, and apparently is doing very well in it. And her mother started reading up on it and started giving pointers, and Lulu said, "Mom, you ruined the violin for me, don't ruin tennis." So thankfully, I think the mother learned a little bit, and in the last chapter of the book, you see that she's backed off. The conclusion is interesting. It just kind of sputters to a halt. Chua asks herself, and she asks her husband, and she asks her daughters as she is writing this book, was it all worth it? Did I do the right thing? I think the jury is still out on that. She doesn't come to a definitive conclusion, and I don't think her daughters, who are now, I think, 14 and 17, I don't think we're going to be seeing any of the long-term damage with them right away. Yes, of course, they will get into spectacular colleges. They will do extremely well. They'll always be able to play violin and piano at an incredibly high level. I'm going to take another swig of water and then tear the book apart. Where does this book stand in the canon of works about parenting? The how-to manuals, the funny self-help books, and the memoirs. It's certainly a far cry from what Roseanne Barr used to say during her days as a stand-up comedian, which is, if it's 5 o'clock and my kids are still alive, I've done my job. There has to be a happy medium between Roseanne Barr and Amy Chua. I'm sure that when the publishers saw the manuscript for this, they thought, ka-ching, because parenting now is becoming a blood sport. It's not enough just for your child to do well. They really have to excel, and not just in one thing. They have to get great grades. They have to do a sport or play a musical instrument. They have to do volunteer work, which they may or may not care about, but you need to put that on your application for college. I'm sure the publishers saw this and thought, not only do we have discussions about, I'm a better mother than you are, we get to raise the specter of fear about Red China, and will the sleeping dragon awake and thrash the United States economically? 30 years ago, 50 years ago, a publisher would have seen this and thought, this is too much. What is the book to us? It's a freak show. It's a fascinating freak show. It's like a car accident. It's fascinating, but you can't help looking at it, and you're thinking all the time, oh my God, these poor people. This is a really fascinating tale. It reads very quickly. It reads very smoothly. If you have time after dinner, you can sit down at 7 o'clock and have a few hours. You can read it in one sitting. However, this family doesn't have anything in common with about 99.99% of the rest of the world. They're faculty members at Yale. Think of the money and the connections that they have, what they're able to do for their kids that most families can't. Chua, as we said earlier, says you don't have to be Asian to be a tiger mother. There is actually a book out there for those of us who want to get in on the game and want some actual practical advice. Let's see, Top of the Class, How Asian Parents Raise High Achievers and How You Can Do It Too, by Sue Kim Abood. And this book says, we're not any smarter than the rest of you. We just work a lot harder than you do. A friend of mine, she was doing some student teaching about a year ago, and there was a girl in kindergarten, and her family was from India, and she was doing work that a second or third grader could do while the rest of the kids were learning how to count. And my friend took her aside and said, "What's your secret? She's like amazing. She could be in third grade with what she's doing with math." And the mom said, "There is no secret at all. We just drill, 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 drill every night." And yes, it got results, and it was amazing, because if you're moving ahead in kindergarten, you're going to be moving ahead in middle school, and you're going to be way ahead in high school, and then you're going to be getting into Stanford, and then you're going to be doing some amazing stuff. But what is your child not doing when they're home drilling for hours? They're not out kicking a ball around the yard. They're not making up games with their imagination. They're not getting physical exercise. They're not bonding with other friends. They're not building relationships with people. Also, and Chua says not all Chinese mothers are doing this, but don't give me the "we're Asian and this is how we do it" story. Just because you're doing something that way doesn't mean it's right. Just because a certain group of people does something that way, and they've always done it that way, doesn't mean it should be. That's like Germans saying, we've always been kind of anti-Semitic. It's just how we are. Or people in the southern United States saying, we have certain prejudices, but that's us. Let's have a little transcendentalism here. Let's have some self-improvement. And this is just me, and I'm saying this out loud for the first time in public, but it doesn't have to do with jealousy, because I can't do it and my own kids can't do it. But there's something that I think is a little sick-making and even vaguely pornographic about 7, 8-year-old children performing concert-level pieces. There's something that just doesn't work. It's almost like they're trained seals or something. And I wonder, while they're playing that, are they moved by it? Do they understand it emotionally? I mean, who's to say when we go up to SPAC and hear the Philadelphia Orchestra, do we understand it intellectually and emotionally? But I'm wondering, if you flog a child enough like a jockey on a horse, you can probably get them to do a lot of stuff. But does that mean it's right to do it? What do they give up in terms of a normal life so we can gather in tons of compliments as parents? Chua writes to shock, and there were several times in the book where I thought, oh, I get it, she's exaggerating here. But she wasn't. She's trying to be ironic here. No. This is how their family is. Again, I have no problem pushing kids to do a little harder. I think American children could probably do more and learn more and achieve more than we expect them to do. When I was in school, way back during the Civil War, we didn't have homework until 3rd grade. I distinctly remember bringing home my English textbook and saying, I have homework, and I was in 3rd grade. My son was in kindergarten this past year, and he had a homework packet every week. There were little math sheets where you had to connect numbers, or color the first elephant purple, color the 5th elephant yellow, just to know that they understood their colors and their ordinals. My parents were a little surprised that he had homework, and I was thinking he could probably do even more, and I wouldn't have a problem with that. But am I going to drill him with flashcards for 2 or 3 hours a night? No. Am I going to expect a 4-year-old to practice? When the girls were 4, they were expected to practice 90 minutes a day. As they got older, it was 2 and 3 hours. And she said, Western mothers, 1 hour is all they can take. Chinese mothers know that it's the 2nd and 3rd and even 4th hours where stuff gets hard. Let's see. I was amazed at, considering that Chua has an incredibly high-powered career of her own, that she is so emotionally invested in her daughters. It's always, we have to practice, or that's not a good idea for us, or finally, we're giving up the violin. It's not about her. It's always about her. There's just this little unit, and she can't seem to separate or have emotional boundaries from her daughter. I know that that's something that I really need to learn, because I am way too invested in my daughter's grades, who is she's in 2nd grade. And I know when she's had a test or a quiz that day, when I pick her up after school at 3 o'clock, I am practically grabbing her backpack out of her hand and getting her purple take-home folder out to see what she got. And I don't make her stand there like this and wait. It's just kind of like, okay, honey, let me see your backpack. And then I take the purple folder out. And if the grade's above a 90, I'm happy for the rest of the day. And if it's below a 90, I pout a little bit. And I say, well, honey, what happened here? I think you were prepared, but what happened here? And one day, it was my birthday last November, and she got a reading comprehension grade that I was not satisfied with, and sorry, it's getting a little hot up here. That I was just not satisfied with. And I said, honey, we worked on this. I know that you could have done better. Were you not focusing? Did you not understand the material? And she, yeah, sit in the back seat. And we pick her brother up at school, and he said, Olivia, how was your day at school? She said, it was fine till Miss Happy Birthday got a hold of my reading test. So my daughter is never going to be one to cower. She's one of those true American children. It was my birthday that day. She's not going to take any of my guff. One big question is, what happens to these kids once they get out of high school and go away to college? And what happens when they get out of college? If their whole life has been having a mother ride them like a jockey, how are they going to succeed themselves? There was a really interesting article that Joe Nash gave me about, it was a New York magazine, and it was called Paper Tigers, and it was about that very thing. There's a public high school in New York City called Stuyvesant High School. It's considered one of the best high schools, public or private, in the nation. There is one requirement for getting in: an entrance exam. They don't care if your parents went there. They don't care how much money you have. They don't care what your other grades were previously. They don't care what instrument you can play. It's just, what do you get on the entrance exam? 72% of the school is Asian right now. They have, and in the article it says simply, they practice the entrance exams from past years over and over and over until they can perfect them. They have something called cram schools, where kids go to prepare for entrance exams like this, or prepare for their SATs, or their GMATs, or their LSATs, where you drill over and over. It's like the Indian mother of the child that my friend used to teach. She said, we're not any smarter than anybody else. We just work really, really hard, way harder than I think most American parents are going to expect their children to do. There is a high school in California near Silicon Valley, and because of the number of high-tech and computer firms there were a lot of Asian people who had graduated from Berkeley, from Stanford, who had come over there and taken jobs in that sector. It was a public school, and because there was such cutthroat competition and such a high standard expected, if you had a B+ average, you were in the lower third of your class, which astounds me. I'm sorry? Well, okay. And he tells a story about an Asian man who applied for a job at IBM out in California. And the interviewer, who was Asian, said, come in, shut the door. And he explained, you're going to get into this company and you're just going to be another Asian guy with a PhD from Stanford, and they're not going to promote you because they don't really promote Asian people here because we don't play the game. We kept our heads down, we worked hard, we learned, we got excellent grades, but we didn't learn how to work with other people. There was an article in the Chronicle of Higher Education when this book first came out saying, are all these kids who can play piano beautifully and get great scores on their SATs, are they getting into the good colleges, and are they getting into the good careers? And the colleges are saying, we're not just looking for the good grades, we're just not looking for the virtuoso piano playing, we're looking for kids who want to compose their own stuff. We're looking for kids who have some new ideas of their own. How do they work with other people? Can they lead? Can they follow? It's okay to do well on the academics, but there's just a whole other part of a person that matters. Let's see. One criticism I also have of Amy Chua is why this obsessive focus on academic achievement. Everyone has to go to college now, and it's got to be a good college. And yes, the people who graduate with PhDs, who teach, perform an incredibly important function in our society. They're writing, they're doing research, they're taking us ahead in so many different fields. But that's the only, it seems like for people like Chua, not everyone, that's the only way you can be successful. I sometimes wonder, what if my hot water heater goes, and I call my plumber, and he says, "Oh yeah, Ms. Witkowski, what's up?" And I say, "My hot water heater just went. The thing blew. I have no hot water, and the weekend's coming up. How can you help me?" And what if he says, "I'm working on Mendelssohn's Rondo Capriccioso right now. There's something about it I just can't get right. You know what? Put some water in the tub, boil a pot of water, put it in there, and you'll have warm water. Don't worry about it. I really need to work on this piece." What if my house catches fire, and I call my local ladder, and the chief says, "Your house is on fire?" You know what? All the guys, they just applied for the PhD program at UAlbany. Russian literature, isn't that great? Do you have a fire extinguisher? Use it. So there are a lot of different important roles in our society, and there's a big focus now on kids going to good colleges, but we have to realize not everyone is college material. Not everyone is Harvard, Yale, Princeton material. And people need to lighten up, and I certainly need to lighten up when my daughter comes out of school with her backpack. Just in closing, and I know you've been so polite, thank you so much for listening as I ramble on. One more thing is, what if the best your child can do is a B or a B+? What if they work really hard and that is honestly their best? For people like Chua, that's just not going to be acceptable, but the rest of us, I think, need to learn from her really uptight example and just try to accept our kids more as they are. And I can tell right now, standing where I am, that I'm going to be 80 years old and looking back on this thinking, I should have worried a lot less. I should have taken the 88 or the 85 that my daughter got and said, "Good for you, honey. Did you like the book?" And if she said, "Yeah," then that's fine. That's fine. If she doesn't want to play guitar, maybe she wants to do something else. Derek Jeter, the shortstop for the New York Yankees, he had a grandfather who died a couple years ago. He was a maintenance man for a Catholic church and school in New Jersey. Incredibly hardworking guy, got up at 4:30 every morning and just was helping people all day. When he wasn't working at the church and school, he was helping out his neighbors. Older ladies who just, needed to get an air conditioner in the window, or, the nuns who needed this wall painted because the paint was peeling, and he always did it. And he didn't expect accolades, and he didn't expect the money. And at his funeral, which Derek Jeter attended, someone giving the eulogy said that it just extolled his virtues as a decent human being. It's just a nice guy who helped other people. And he said, if Derek Jeter achieves that in this lifetime, he will have achieved much. And one more poem. If I ever get caught up on my laundry, I might actually cross-stitch this somewhere. This is by John Boyle O'Reilly. "What is the real good?" I ask in a musing mood. "Order," said the law court. "Knowledge," said the school. "Truth," said the wise man. "Pleasure," said the fool. "Love," said the maiden. "Beauty," said the page. "Freedom," said the dreamer. "Home," said the sage. "Fame," said the soldier. "Equity," said the seer. Spake my heart fully sad, the answer is not here. Then within my bosom softly this I heard. Each heart holds the secret. Kindness is the word. If we can give that to our children, then I think we will have done well. Thank you all very, very much.